Okay.
Digital nutrition. So I came up with this concept 10 years ago, actually, and it was in response to the idea of digital detoxing. So everybody was talking about like detox from technology. And my sense about that was that um, technology itself isn't toxic, that we actually need to learn to live alongside technology. And the idea of like pushing it away and having a few days where you're logged off only to come back online and kind of binge through your kind of notifications and catch up on your emails, to me didn't seem like a sustainable habit. I also didn't really like the idea that we were using diet culture kind of conversations and ideas with all of that. So digital nutrition came out of my mouth, and here I am 10 years later talking about it.
You were talking, the last thing I heard you say was how it's 10 years later and here you
Mm,
are with the name
I
Digital
know.
Nutrition, right? And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Well done for sticking to it. It's one thing to find out something or to start something. It's another thing to stick with it and stick with it through time. So well done. I really, really commend you
Thank
for
you.
that. So
Yeah.
tell me, how can parents rethink the love-hate relationship to holistic digital well-being perspective?
Yeah, it's a
What are
great
your thoughts on that?
question because we use technology ourselves so much, right? Like you'll
Mm-hmm.
catch me on my phone often, and my daughter is really, really good at saying, Mum, you shouldn't be on your phone first thing in the morning. So I think part of this is to be able to zoom out and notice just how embedded technology is in our lives
Mm-hmm.
and what we use it for automatically. So we find ourselves, really kind of picking up and using it without thinking. But then to also appreciate that if we didn't have technology, we wouldn't be doing this right now, and maybe you're ready to get very angry at the technology and all the
Yeah,
glitches that are
yeah.
happening, right? So I think part of it is to really separate what we're using it for, the utility, and then how that links into our lives and the benefits that we get from it.
Mm.
um, and I guess I hate the word balance. That's another like pet thing that I don't like using, because balance to me is like, oh, I've got to get it very right and I've got to maintain it. I think it's about the blend. So across your week, did you get enough
Integration, yeah.
sleep? Did you get enough exercise? Of
Hmm.
course, we're going to use technology sometimes too often, but on the whole, can we say that we're mostly aligned with our values?
That's amazing. I like that. So even though we're starting 10 o'clock Nigerian time, I usually have a Saturday routine where I must do my morning walk and my morning dance. But then it was going to clash when we're starting this. I'm like, you know what? Okay, I'll just lose 1 hour. So instead of 3 hours, I'll do 2 hours. But at the end of the day, put something in. So it, like you said, it's really the integration, more like how do we integrate different aspects of our lives? Yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
too, with that, as parents, as mums especially, we are constantly trying to do too much. I think that's the big message that
Mm,
I find with parents at the
mm,
moment, is so unrealistic what we expect ourselves to do, right? Like we're full-time mums, working full-time sometimes, then we want to have this lifestyle and well-being that maybe our
mhm,
mums didn't have.
mhm,
My mum certainly didn't
mhm.
go to the gym and do yoga. We have in Australia too cafe culture and restaurant culture. I didn't grow up with that. So trying to get a kid to sit in a cafe, like they're not designed for that. Let's be really, really honest. So
But we
just
just do
getting
the best
really,
we can.
yeah, pardon?
Yeah, we try to do the best we can regardless.
Absolutely, absolutely. But sometimes I think we've got a message that we have to be able to do it all and it should be easy, when the reality is
Mm,
it's usually pretty hard and exhausting.
mm. Okay, so with that in perspective, let's come from the other angle. What do you consider to be the biggest challenge, right, to positive interaction with digital consumption? I mean, but even with parents. So yesterday, for
Yeah.
example, I was feeling guilty when we are just talking all about this. My husband came back and I came back and the children were there. So he's trying to fix something on the cable. And then I'm with my phone. So I'm leaning on him, but he's on his phone and I'm on my phone. And in my mind, I was like, both of you on your phone. What do you think the children are thinking at this moment? Are they
Yeah.
thinking that, oh, you're actually trying to sort something? Or are they thinking that you are away in your world? When I become an adult too, I'm going to be away in my world typing away, right? So what do you consider to be the biggest challenge, right, to positive interaction with digital consumption, both with parents and children?
Yeah, I think it is that kind of automaticness that happens. We get really sort of, it's an unconscious thing that we do. Every spare
Mm,
moment, we just like grab for our phone and go and do something. And I guess the thing is that our phones do many, many different things. So when our kids see us pick up our phones, it could be to pay a credit card bill, it could be to check what the weather is so we dress them so they don't get rained on or whatever. We know though, we go to pay that credit card bill, we see some Instagram notifications, we end up doing that and then forget to pay the credit card bill. So it is about, and there's this great concept of narrating your parenting or narrating what you do with your phone, like saying, I am just going to check the weather. I am just going to check, you know, what time the excursion leaves
mm,
or whatever practical thing. So we keep on track, but we're also signaling to kids like, I'm not just playing Candy Crush, you know, here.
mhm,
I'm not
mhm,
just, you know, taking selfies and chatting to my friends. For me, I run my business through that. I could be communicating with a client or moving appointments around and all of that kind of boring mum stuff.
mm,
So I think one of the problems is that automaticness. The biggest challenge I have in my work is really getting people to proactively consider this stuff. And, you know, parent education is not very sexy. It's not very easy to sell to people. If you invest time now, you will save lots of pain down the track.
mhm,
And my work as a psychologist is often dealing with kids who are significantly addicted to the internet, who are having really big problems getting offline. And it costs a lot of money and time at that point. We
mm.
have a very special visitor who will not go to bed. It is 9 o'clock in
Hey, how
Australia.
are you?
So say hello and then go to bed. Okay. Go to your room. Good
Hi,
girl.
good night.
Sorry. It's her dad is out and I'm home
No, but
parenting
this
alone.
just shows, and this is an example. I would just say you were talking about it earlier that we don't assume that they should know. They don't need to understand. So it's the part where parents now need to explain to the children, like you just did, bringing her. So she probably thinks you are sitting on your laptop just
Mm,
doing whatever it is, but her coming to see, and then there's someone else there. There's actually something going on. The ability to engage them and let them know.
yeah.
So I could tell my son, I say, okay, see what I'm doing. So he's actually come earlier to say, oh, how come? I thought you had a session. I said, yes, I have a session, but I'm off. Two people are talking. And then he sees that. So they recognize that you aren't playing away. So it's not like a two, because I mean, if you can do it, why can't I do it? So I
Yeah.
really totally love that you brought her in.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And
she
I
she
guess,
knows what my work is and she always wants to be a
okay.
part of it, right? And she's very social. And her dad was born in South Africa. So the idea that I'm talking to African ladies, she's like, the African ladies. Okay, quickly ask me something. Quick. No, no,
Are
quick.
you soon?
Yeah, I'll be off really soon. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to come and see you.
Okay. So let's get straight so you can have time for her.
Yeah.
What is, in your opinion, what is cyber psychology?
Yeah, cyber psychology is an emerging field which really looks at the intersection of consumer technologies and, you know, human psychology. So human psychology is all about the brain, perception, behavior, not how we think and how our brain works, but all of the emotions and stuff that comes out of that too. So for me, the simplest explanation is it's how technology is changing how we live, love, and learn.
Mm, mm, mm,
It's very
mm,
multidisciplinary. So, in my research group at Sydney Uni, we've got people in engineering and computer science, we've got people in the business school, we've got people in pure psychology, as well as medicine and health sciences. So, it's, you know, a bit of everything. Before I was a psychologist, I was a social science teacher. So, I taught all sorts of, you know, things like geography,
mm.
and so at that kind of heart, I guess I'm a social scientist who now has moved into psychology and then specifically cyber psychology. So a job of the future that really didn't exist. You know, when I started in this work about 15 years ago, I hadn't heard the word cyber psychology. It was probably only about 8 years ago that was really a term that we started to use a lot.
So in all of this is our fourth industrial revolution, where
Mm.
things are where we're talking about such things like like cyber psychology and digital parenting, and where we now need to have digital skills and all of it. Pray tell, who is the most important person, right, when it comes to getting equipped with these digital skills?
Yeah, that's a really good question too, because I think everyone, right? This is an equity thing. This is about everyone sort of being on the same starting point. As parents, we're the first generation who had to deal with this, and our kids,
Mhm.
while they have underdeveloped brains and they kind of need some guidance and protection,
Mm.
and they need us to be the adults in the room, we all have to do this together and shoulder to shoulder. I think one of the problems within the space is the idea that we say, oh, we have to I don't know, yes, we have to protect kids, but we have to save them
Mm.
rather than giving them a voice and really bringing them along and showing them that we're discovering this at the same time. And
Yeah.
them watching us problem solve is a really, really powerful kind of thing for us to be doing with them. And again, like I was listening to the session beforehand, it's really about like no one being wrong, no one being right, not doing things like our parents did it. We can't rely on the way that our parents did things, because I know I would have just gotten my bum smacked every time I did something wrong. And we can't do that now. And in fact,
Mm.
it's basically illegal in Australia to smack your kids. So um, I think we have to be the adults, but we have to listen to young people, and especially to teenagers too, because they've got some
Mm.
great ideas.
Mm. Mm. That's that. Thank you so much. So, in there's also this talk of digital revolution comes with a lot of AI, the Internet of Things, and all of that.
Mm.
And because as human beings, we're actually social beings and we're created to communicate with each other. However, with this fourth industrial revolution, we are actually more apart than we are together. So we're having more virtual experiences and all of it. And then it begins to take its toll on our humanity. So as a psychologist, and you have all the experience in psychology of technology, how would you advise for people to stay human regardless of a digitally saturated world or
Yeah.
regardless of a digitally saturated age? Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think this is about our consciousness. It's about our ability to choose, I guess, to be aware, to actually be mindful and to use the technology in our skulls, which really remains the most powerful piece of technology on the planet to take control and to hack back, I guess, against, some of this addiction and the saturation that we're talking about. I
Mm.
don't pretend that as one human, I can take on the big tech. I think, yes, we really need to design differently and we need to, require people to be more ethical. But I feel like the biggest thing that we can do is actually remember the things that make us human, which is our ability to be kind, to connect, to use our brains to make conscious choices about who we want to be and what we want to say in those online spaces.
Mm. So just a quick reminder to people, to everyone in the room, if you have questions, please put in your questions in the Q&A session so we can throw them at Joycelyn just before she leaves. So bring in all your questions. And just moving on to that, it's a global village, right? And we
Mhm.
have global challenges. Right now, it's a global challenge that we're facing on different fronts. But how would you advise families and advise parents on digital nutrition, on how to think about digital nutrition?
Yeah, look, it's a really simple way, and I guess the reason that I'm using food and not drugs as that analogy is we all kind of need to eat, and we all, we sit down and we don't say to our kids, "Okay, you've got 20 minutes of food time." We look at kind of the nutrients on their plate. We look at the combination of, veggies and carbs and proteins and things like that. So
Mm.
similarly, what we want to do here is just to really consider that screen time is many things. It's not just one static thing, and that we
Mm.
really need to look at the content of what we're consuming. Who made that content? Why did they make that content? We've got a situation in Australia at the moment. We're about to vote on have a referendum to vote to change our constitution, which will recognise First Nations people in the constitution and give them a voice to Parliament. An incredibly important piece of history, an
Mm.
opportunity that we have next weekend. And there is so much misinformation coming out, basically from people who are racist and scared, that is really misconstruing what's happening. And one of the key skills, it's digital well-being and digital nutrition, but within that is actually higher order thinking and critical thinking. When you see racist junk on the internet, and not just misinformation but disinformation, absolute lies, to be able to speak back to that and to be able to use your brain, again, this technology, to be able to think through making, the decision we as a nation are making next weekend. So many issues sit within this. It's big and exciting, but also sometimes really scary.
So do you think parents should be concerned about digital consumption, and what are the signs that it could be problematic?
We all need to be concerned about what we put in our eyeballs, right? What we're consuming and feeding our brains, literally. And that's just not teenagers, but teenagers are, I guess, a little bit more attracted to the internet. Their communities are in those online spaces, I guess, in a way, and they're wired into those spaces in a way that sometimes we're not. Though at this point, most of us, still are using Facebook and some of those base level kind of social media platforms to connect. I think there are real risks, and we know that probably between 1% to 5% of the population will be clinically addicted to some form of using the internet. Usually it's young men and games. But for most of us, it's really, it is about that blended way of living to make sure that we're kind of getting enough sleep and movement and all of those base things that we know are really good for our well-being. So be alert but not alarmed. Like, we have to kind of keep our eye on the fact that technology is not going away. It's not even going to get smaller or less impactful. It's getting more immersive and, harder, I guess, as I was saying before, with misinformation and disinformation and the volume, right, of what we're trying to consume. We really have to be ready, because ultimately our brains are ancient. We are not designed to consume this much information.
And when you talked about screen time, I remember when so I give my boys a rule: there's too much of screen time, put off the TV, and no enough screen time for the moment. Go play outside, take the dog out, go play football or go swimming or do something. And then the older one leaves the younger one to go outside and go sits on his laptop. I'm like, you said no screen time. I said, what's the laptop made of? That's a screen.
Yeah.
If you can't watch TV, no, you can't watch that one. Turn it off, right? But it's at the end of the day, the consumption really is. We have the responsibility as parents to be able to help them to also find some level of integration and, let's not say balance, some level of integration, so that they also grow up to have wholesome thinking and wholesome, well-formed brains with the kind of things that they have taken in. Thank you so much, Joycelyn. Questions? I'm looking forward to questions. So, Joycelyn, how do we reach you? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah.
To know more about digital consumption.
Yeah, digital nutrition. If you Google that or put it into whatever other search engine you might be using, it comes up with me. So yeah, that's probably the easiest place. If you're on Instagram, I'm digital_nutrition. I'm not on TikTok. I'm too old for TikTok. And TikTok sets my brain on fire. It's I really have to be careful. But I do also, I don't know if you've got the link there, but I am running a course called Screens in Early Childhood, and I've got a special coupon code that hopefully someone can drop into the chat. I wasn't able to put that into the comments earlier. I can put it into the private chat and maybe they can copy it. But you get access to my course basically for half price. So I would love as many people as possible. If you've got a toddler or a preschooler and you're like, how do I integrate this in a healthy way? How much is too much? What should I do? This is basically practical and dynamic. I do not know how to parent all of your children. I'm just going to give you some principles and ideas that you can then take what works for your family and really kind of get creative and build it from there. It is literally based on me trying to work out screen time with the little person who popped in earlier, who's now 6.5. So I actually wrote this a couple of years ago in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm relaunching it. So it would be fantastic to get as many people along to that, share it with your community. There's a really good deal there, 4 sessions for like 20 Australian dollars, which I don't know what that converts to exactly where all of you beautiful people are around the world, but yeah, check it out.
2 questions for you quickly, Joycelyn.
Yeah, go for it. I'm happy to stick around. I think she's gone to bed, so we can keep going.
Okay. So it says, how can parents reduce the tension when it comes to managing screen time? The
Oh, look, I
tension
think
being key
the
word. Yeah.
tension and the conflict and the drama and the,
Yes.
oh, 1 more minute, 2 more minutes, I promise after this. I think it's about having conversations, you
Yes.
know? I think it's really just about talking about, I can see that you really love that show. I can see you're really enjoying watching this kid play. At the moment, she's watching a lot of this game called Piggy, which is a part of Roblox. She's obviously
Mhm.
not allowed to play Roblox because she's 6.5, and once she's 13, we'll talk about Roblox. But and that's as close as she's probably going to get. So a lot of it has to do with just talking like this. Why is this really interesting to you? And if
Mm,
you can't talk to me about it and have a conversation, then we're not going to consume it. Because, like you
mm,
were saying with your son, like he goes down the rabbit hole and the other one's out playing and things like that.
yeah.
We want to use this to connect.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to my 90s example of we all had to sit around the one TV we had in the house when I was growing up and watch a show together. We couldn't go off each on our, different screens, or even sit there with 2 or 3 screens in our own little world. We were together. So having conversation
Yeah.
and using communication skills is probably the best thing there. Again, I have a course called Design Your Family's Tech Use Agreement, which is a co-design process with the young people in your home to actually have those conversations and then creating an agreement as a result of them. And it's all about recognizing the good and the bad and creating that digital diet that suits different members of the family, because even with your 2 sons, they probably have very different interests in those online spaces. So some
Absolutely.
kids just aren't that into it. Some kids, you can't pull them off the gaming console. Yeah.
Thank you. So it's still on screen time. So
Mm-hmm.
there are 2 questions that both related to screen time. One person is asking, Zainab is asking, what's your recommended screen time for ages 7 to 9? And I don't know if you
Yeah.
can merge that with this. What's the solution for screen time autism? Where a child is withdrawn from activities with real people, but excited about screen time? Can you merge
Mm.
those 2 together? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to say something controversial, which is I don't believe in screen time limits. So the idea of just going, okay, you've had your 2 hours, that's healthy, goodbye. I don't believe in. So it's a lot of those limits that the American Academy of Pediatrics have given us are actually based on sedentary guidelines, and it's about what can we afford to displace. So in 24 hours, your kid needs to sleep probably 8 to 10 of those hours. You need to go to school, you need to move, you need to do whatever. Therefore, this is the amount of time left over. I don't think it really works like that in practice anymore. I think we need to look at the content of what they're consuming, because 2 hours might be, within the screen time limits. But if it's violent, aggressive, awful material, then 0 minutes is okay. So I would really be careful about using time as the only metric. And that's, again, the basis of digital nutrition is about virtual vitamins, and what are the additives into some of those things. In terms of the screen time autism, and I'm going to take that as, rather than using the term autism, really thinking about it around losing your social interactions or preferring the online world compared to real life. I think what happens here is that screens meet 3 psychological needs of young people really, really well, and that sometimes the real world doesn't meet them as well. And they are basically connection. I feel connected to like-minded individuals. So if there's no one in my family or my, community that really loves this niche thing that I love, then I'm going to find those people online. So that's connection. Competence. I'm really good at this thing. I'm not very good, for instance, personally at ball sports. I can't play netball. I can't play basketball. My eyes don't work well enough. So I'm not very competent at it, but I'm really good at, graphic design and things like that. So I might get into, my online world based on that. So that's competence. And then control. Do I have autonomy and the ability to choose what I'm doing? In a classroom, probably in maths, you're given a worksheet to do, or you're given an activity. You're not asked what out of these 3 or 4 different activities would you choose to do. So those 3 things, competence, connection, and control, really play into kids' psychological needs. And that's why they choose online spaces, because the online world meets those a lot better than, for me playing netball or, you know, doing some of those other things. So it's called self-determination theory. I talk a lot about it in my work because it really is what underpins why we're so driven to technology, especially for young people.
Thank you. Thank you, Joycelyn. Competence, connection, and control. That stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Total
I
pleasure.
don't see any further questions. So I guess this is what we say. Thank you. Thank you, Joycelyn. Thank you so much. Can we give Joycelyn a virtual round of
Thank
applause? A
you.
virtual appreciation, everyone.